I'm going to just start by sort of going through the history of who I am, who exchange suppliers are, what we do, and then how the whole coloured syringes thing happened, and explain the whole manufacture. Really give you all the information that you might need to talk to your clients and your colleagues about what it is and how it got here. So we got a really unusual thing, almost unique, that we sort of see ourselves. What we do now is we work out what it is that is going to be best for injecting drug users, and then we go off and we find a manufacturer who can make exactly the product that the people who are injecting want, and then we have it made. And it's we never expected to find ourselves here, but it's a pretty nice position to be in, because a lot of the time when you're working in needle and syringe programs, there's things that we moan about that aren't the way that we want them to be, and so we've managed to get ourselves into a position where we don't have to wait for other people, governments to fund it, or industry to make it. We just can go off and sort it out for ourselves. So we're part of this sector that's known as social enterprise. But I'm happy to say we were doing it before it had a name. It's sort of like the Big Issue was one of the first social enterprises. Just this idea that business isn't just about making money, that they can do other stuff as well. And so the idea that you have a triple bottom line, so that in order to be able to develop new stuff, we have to be making money, so that we've got an R&D budget to go off and do new things, to buy more stock when we need stock, new tools. But we're always driven by the fact that really what we're trying to do is reduce the negative health impacts of injecting drug use. So we always say, when we're looking at what we're going to do in the year, that the things that are at the top of our to-do list are the things that have got the biggest potential to reduce drug-related deaths and harm. That's what we're working to. But we have the social objectives. Like when you're a drug worker, you often think, actually, a lot of the people, we think of them as having drug problems, but really they have long-term unemployment problems. I often used to think that actually if I could just give some of these people my job, they'd be way better off than seeing me. So at Exchange Supplies, it's really nice. We've got a range of tasks in the warehouse, the sort of picking and packing and getting orders ready and assembling stuff. And so it's a really great employment environment to bring people through, because we've got everything from people who, if they wanted to do a day's work, they turn up, and then we've got a list of jobs that need doing, that we can just give them, so we don't know whether they're going to come in or not. Right through to people who, we're sort of sorting out all of our international deliveries and are totally sort of integrated in. So it's a really nice employment environment. It's sort of like, when you put it out there, I kind of think we're being it's like we're being kind, but it's not. That's not really what it's actually awesome thing for the organisation to do, because of the stigma of drug use. There's a lot of really bright people who can't get jobs in the workplace. So it seems like a philanthropic thing to do, but actually it means we've got really bright, committed staff who will do anything for us. So they're a great part. And it means when we're testing products and stuff, you can just go out into the warehouse and put it on the desk, and then you've got a load of experts straight away who tell you what they think of it, which is it's a really quick product development process. Testing. And then there's a sort of broader harm reduction movement, which we see ourselves very much a part of. We sort of came out of activist roots and see that as an important thing to be involved in as well. So how did we get to that point? I mean, I started off as a drug and alcohol clinician working in harm reduction services, doing needle and syringe exchange and supporting methadone prescribing with GPs in the south of England. And I sort of, you have the booklets that you give out, but all the booklets were written, there was sort of one on all the illegal drugs, but I realised pretty early on that there was nothing about methadone, which is the thing that is the stock in trade of most of the work in a drug service. And so was getting asked questions about it, so wrote this thing called the Methadone Handbook, which eventually there was an Australian edition of it. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah. So I got into this thing. Basically, if I thought something was going to be useful for me as a drug worker, it turned out it was really worth printing it and selling it, because we're all doing the same job, and if it's going to be useful for me in my practice, it would turn out it's going to be useful for pretty much everyone. And as a young drug worker, it was a really great way of learning stuff, because once you start writing a book, you've got an excuse to go write to people and ask them if you can talk to them and if they'll review your copy for you. So that was a really good start. And we kind of self-publishing. So that was where I started to sort of learn about how you run a business, because we'd print the stuff, we'd sell the books for more than we printed them for, and then you could save up for the next book. And that was really how it kind of started off as a little snowball, and then over the years it grows. So the more things you've got selling, the more money you're bringing in, the bigger the next project can be. We never had any idea they were going to get quite as big as they've got, but that's how it started. And so, I mean, for me, that was the limit of my knowledge when I published them. But you carry on and you realise that the whole field are sort of using them as their source text. So they then developed into the methadone briefing and the safer injecting briefing, which were kind of bigger textbooks, like workers' guides to those key areas of practice. And then the campaigns, which Robert was talking about, we're really lucky that the Department of Health got budgets to run public information campaigns, and the field sort of said, look, we just don't need magazine adverts. That is not really going to help your average injecting drug user. It'd be much better if drug services had kind of quality resources that we could give out. So we were asked to do campaigns of 3. The first 3 were hepatitis B vaccination, overdose, and the break the cycle stuff, which we did here. Does everybody? Yeah. Okay. So I don't need to talk about that. But they're really interesting from the point of view of in developing them. What you're trying to do is you're going out and you're talking to injecting drug users about exactly what it is you want to say and what they hear when you give them the message in different ways, and really trying to develop stuff that works. When people see it, they engage with it and they understand it, and it doesn't offend them, and it does engage them and bring them in. So those 3 campaigns, and then the vein care, which was a big thing in Queensland at the time. I can't remember when that was, but it was quite some time ago. Yeah, overdose and hepatitis C. So, and the Harm Reduction Works logo here, that was quite a brief. The Department of Health wanted an overarching sort of campaign for it, and it's a bit difficult because these sort of posters go up in all sorts of healthcare settings, so you can't really have great big syringes. They didn't work. So the logo is a top-down view of somebody injecting. You can see, and it took us a while, but we got it, and it's nice because it's one of those logos that if you don't know what it is, it just looks like an abstract logo, but once you know what it is, you're switched onto it. And yeah, we were pretty pleased with that. That was our graphic designer, not me at all. But he was saying there's a whole load of logos, like the FedEx one. Once you've seen the arrow in between the E and the X, you can always see it, but until you know it's there, you don't see it. And he said that that's what we thought would be a good idea for some of our drugs campaigns, and it did really work. So yeah, it was publications. That's what it was all about. I was still a clinician. But then, so we have a different form of heroin in the UK to you. So your heroin all comes from Asia and is white, and you drop it in a spoon with cold water and it instantly disappears. It's like nirvana for your average. We don't even see it in the UK. We get Afghan brown heroin. I've got a little picture of it here. If it works, can you see that? Yep. Yeah. So. So this is made for smoking. It's not really ideal for injecting, but you put it on the foil and heat it up and it vaporizes. And but when you add water to it, hopefully if I press play, I didn't rehearse this, so it may not work. But when you add water to it, it just doesn't mix at all. So what you need to do then is got a cool name, that's called flocculating, which I don't know why, but I think it's a nice word. Yeah, this is Jenny Scott. She's a pharmacist at the University of Bath whose special interest is the chemistry of illicit drug preparation. She's awesome, she does some great work. So here she is. This is what happens when you add citric acid to it. You just see it in a second, it will start to all go clear. Another top down view there it goes, like magic. Okay, so that's... Yeah, but this is why all UK drug injectors' veins are knackered, because you get these like chemical burns inside your vein. You can feel it when you inject it. It's quite often painful. It's sort of the veins get blocked in no time because that solution is really quite acidic. I won't show the whole film, but the point of this film was we took a sample of the heroin there once it had gone mostly clear, and then we kept adding citric acid, and then took another sample and sent it off to the lab, and when they come back there's no more heroin in the thing that's going to really crucify your veins than there is in the solution that is just going to be quite bad for them. So this was just a sort of attempt to explain to people why you shouldn't just keep pouring citric acid into your solution. So how did that get us? But that's what it looks like when you finished adding the acid. So in the UK there's a sort of clause in the Misuse of Drugs Act which says it's an offence to provide any article that's going to be used for the consumption or preparation of illicit drug as well as the illicit drugs. And unfortunately, community pharmacies, there was a letter to the Pharmaceutical Journal which we think was kind of not malicious, what's the word, when you're just trying to be difficult? Mischievous, yeah. Saying, oh, it's illegal to sell citric acid when people come into the needle exchange. Can the Pharmaceutical Society give us an assurance that there's no chance we'll be prosecuted? Because there was no chance, but obviously the Pharmaceutical Society can't say that to all the pharmacists, and so this idea that it was illegal and they could get prosecuted got out really quickly, and they just started stopping selling citric acid at all of the pharmacies. And it seemed that we tried to educate them that it was okay, there was no way they were going to be prosecuted, that it was reducing harm because people weren't using lemon juice and vinegar to dissolve their drugs. But it seemed the more education we did, the more pharmacists were like, oh, I didn't realise it was illegal, I better stop selling it as well. So it was disastrous. And one of the problems with lemon juice and vinegar as an acidifier for heroin is that you can get a fungal infection that grows on the lemons, and when they squash them it stays in the juice, and it grows on the back of your retina. And so we were doing safer injecting training around the country, and like literally every course would have a worker or two who had clients who were blind in one or both eyes, or had lost sight because this candidal infection was growing on their retinas, which was just crazy. So all of the harm reduction activists were getting more and more agitated about this, and the idea of putting citric acid in a sachet had been sort of mooted as a thing. So we went off to all the companies and said, you should definitely do this, and then you could persuade people that you spoke to, but the trouble was they take it to their board and they'd say, well, it's technically illegal, and then the answer would be no. So after about, I think probably about 2 years of trying to get somebody to put citric acid in a sachet for us. By this time I was freelance, doing freelance training and writing. I was at a UK harm reduction meeting, and of course everybody else was working for the NHS, so they couldn't really get involved in anything. But I was like, look, I'm freelance, I can spend half a day a week. So I started ringing sachet manufacturers, but it turns out it's a little bit more difficult than we thought, because it's a very small amount of powder that you need in there, and the machinery to do it is quite complicated, and most sachet manufacturers just want to dump like 3 or 4 grams of something into a sachet. But eventually we found a bloke who's obsessed with manufacturing sachets. It's his whole life, it's all he thinks about. Yeah, but that's what you need, is people who are passionately interested in stuff, and so he started making the citric acid sachets for us, and that was where we got started. And some people use vitamin C powder in there. So about a year later, once we'd really got the citric sachets going, ascorbic acid came along. So by this time we set up the company, got a little warehouse, we were shipping out sachets. The French Apothecom were making spoons. They had the same legal problems, so we had to get the same sort of arrangements in place to make sure people weren't prosecuted. Started doing filters and water. But still we thought we were, like, what we would be doing was just doing the things that other people wouldn't do or didn't do. This is an interesting one. This is foil. So the break the cycle stuff led to more interest in non-injecting routes of administration of drugs. And obviously you can smoke brown heroin, and it is quite a good way of taking it. And injecting is better, you do get a bigger dose faster, but when your veins are knackered, and if it takes you half an hour to find a vein, then actually smoking heroin you do get more drug and you do get it more quickly. So needle exchange workers were trying to talk to people about it, but we felt that there's a sort of mismatch where you give people injecting equipment, you're sort of saying something about how important you think it is, and if you just say, oh well, you could smoke it, it doesn't have the same force, and not everybody has kitchen foil in their house. So we had this idea that foil would be a good idea. We found a company that makes foil products, and I don't think you have it here, but this is what this is actually, is when they're putting bleach into hair, the bits of foil that they wrap around your hair. So they're interleaved with tissue, and there's a company that makes them for the big hairdressing chains, and they put the big hairdressing chains logos and stuff on the front of the pack, and so we asked them to make one for smoking heroin. We now sell more foil than any of the hairdressing chains, so we're their biggest customer. There's more of it gets used for heroin than for bleach, by any one customer. And what they did was they sent us, so they roll the foil between steel rollers to get the different thicknesses. So they sent us like a little pack of sheets of 6 different thicknesses of microns, and then we took that to some heroin chasers, and for a week they practiced with all the different thicknesses, and then we got the perfect. We were able to say, right, this is, I forget what it is, like 16 micron is the thickness to go for. So then subsequently we've done a little roll and a little CD case with 5 in, because it's the thing, if you're just encouraging people to do it, if they're not smokers, it's a lot to give them 20 or 50 sheets if they may not use it. So although it's more per sheet to give a pack of 5, at least you can deliver the intervention quite cheaply. Don't worry, I'll get to syringes soon. Already I get to syringes, right. So this was a big change. Have you seen Avril Taylor? Do you recognise? Should I tell you the whole thing? Okay, good. So this is one of those moments in harm reduction where you think things aren't going to change, and then all of a sudden you get told something totally new. And I didn't. This was totally new for me as well. So this is part of the change. I think when we started, most of us, like coming from a nursing background, we think of bloodborne virus risk. A lot of that is about information and knowledge and attitude to risk, and that is where the danger is in how people, what they know, what they understand, and what risks they're prepared to take in their injecting. But Avril and her colleagues in Scotland were puzzling over the problem of how it was that when reported sharing rates were really quite low, the incidence of hepatitis C was really high. So many people catching it, especially in their first year of injecting. Like, what is going on? So she's a sociologist, really, and she said, well, in other areas of life, when you're asking people about activities that they do all the time, we know from other research that people report what they're doing very poorly, because they kind of, it's almost automatic. It's like driving. Everyone thinks they're a great driver. They don't take risks. So in other areas of when you're trying to understand what's going on, what you do is you video record it, because then you've got an objective view of what's going on, and you can take it back and you can slow it down, and you can itemise the risks. So that's what they eventually did in Scotland. It took them ages to get ethical approval, and they did a study where they embedded themselves in communities of injecting drug users, and then did a fly on the wall documentary videoing of the injecting episode. So Avril went round and did the conference presentations explaining their work. So we made a little film. This is before we had the syringes. We made a little film of her describing the work. So I've got that. Oh yeah. So that's just some stills. I don't know if you can see them, but that's the kind of scenes that they witnessed with syringes everywhere. And this is Avril explaining. Just explaining the study.
The aim of the study was to examine in detail the injecting practices of drug injectors, with a specific focus on the factors which may lead to transmission of hepatitis C. We also identified, though, instances of indirect sharing, and these could took place in two ways. First of all, by mixing up needles, and that could occur where you had injectors who either lived with another injector or who injected habitually with another injector. Now, in one instance, for example, we had two females who were living together and didn't actually want other people to know they were injectors, so they actually stored or hid their needles and syringes in a nest of coffee tables, and we actually saw them retrieving those needles and syringes on one occasion, and when the needles came out, it was quite easy to see that there was no way of knowing which needle and syringe belonged to which female in that house.
Is that yours or mine? No, it's mine.
Now, one of the reasons that mix-ups occur so frequently is because the vast majority of people in our study used the fixed 1 ml diabetic needle and syringe for their injections, and therefore were unable to tell one from the other. I think 88 out of the 103 injections we saw were with a fixed 1 ml needle and syringe, and out of those 88, only 11 were marked in some way to distinguish them for further use. Some people burned with a lighter the end of the plunger so that it was blackened and they would know it was theirs the next time. Other people scraped one of the numbers off the barrel again so that they could distinguish that needle and syringe was theirs. This was also able to let them know the number of times they had used that needle. So if there was 3 numbers had been scored off it, they knew they had used that needle 3 times previously. One of the things that we found in this study was this potential to mix up needles and syringes, and the reason for that was that the vast majority of injectors were using the same kind of needle and syringe, in this particular instance the 1 ml fixed needle and syringe. I think what we have to find is some way that the injectors can actually distinguish between these needles, and that might be by producing the syringes with a different colour on the top rather than just the orange. It could be that we could produce the needles and syringes in a different kind of format. Maybe the barrel could be rough or a different shape or whatever, so that people who are living together could each pick a different type of needle and syringe to be used just for themselves.
That was a moment in, like, all the drug users who saw her present that research were like, yeah, obviously we get it's difficult, and most of the drug workers it was a real surprise for us, and I think it was one of those things that, because there was nothing we could do about it as workers, drug users weren't really talking to us about it as a thing because there wasn't anything we could do. So they recorded 103 injecting episodes. There was only one occasion where a needle got blunted after repeated attempts, and the only one that was available was one that was used, and the woman decided to knowingly share that syringe. You can hear in the background the researchers are saying, we'll run down to the chemist and get you a new syringe if you want. She's like, no, it's okay, it'll be fine. So that was the one, what you might say was deliberate sharing in the study. Then the other case, it turned out it was a bit difficult. So they were just in there, just generally observing everything, and they said afterwards they could follow the drugs. So sometimes the drugs would go off into the other room, and they'd go, you'd come back, and then everything would have moved, and you couldn't tell which syringe was which. Sometimes they were following people, and sometimes they were following syringes. So what they know is that about 30% of the syringes were being reused, and most of those people couldn't have been sure that they were the only one who had used that syringe before. So it was a really difficult thing to quantify, and unfortunately I think just the complexities of trying to get this sort of thing through ethics meant that it's never been properly repeated. And so it's a really difficult thing to nail down exactly how much of it goes on, but it's definitely a thing. I think particularly for couples and people living in houses where they're all reusing syringes, it is really difficult when they're all the same, and it gets a lot easier when they have access to difficult ones. I had kind of hoped to repeat the study here, because it would be great to do the study that Avril did now while all the syringes are insulin syringes, and then introduce the colour, like in Queensland it'll be everywhere, and then video it again. But your laws are different to our laws, and apparently it's a criminal offence to be aware of a serious felony and not report it. So, which obviously, but the trouble is with video footage, you've actually got the footage. So they said that ethics approvals committees won't approve the research because the police can use that law to demand that they get access to your video footage, and obviously you can't ask people to let you record them injecting if you know that the police could use that footage in evidence against them. So, if the question gets asked exactly how effective is it, unfortunately, we just don't know. I mean, what we can say is it's probably effective and it's not costing any more. So it's definitely a good idea. So that sort of started this road. So we spent, so that was 2004. We didn't do our first coloured syringe till 2007. We spent like literally 2 years going to all the syringe companies saying, hey, look, there's all of these syringes. They should be coloured like this, and they were all the BD. Terumo aren't so big in the UK. I can't remember going directly to, but we got the same answer everywhere. B Braun. There's no way we're making a syringe for heroin users. This is off-label use. It's nothing to do with us. And it's also, I had a bit of sympathy with them because obviously the whole medical device industry, what they do is they make things that are identical. That's what you do, and you make them exactly right. You have a specification. The idea of making things that are deliberately different is just completely. So the regulatory affairs departments in all of the companies we approached were the objections about heroin use notwithstanding, were pretty sceptical. So we had a stroke of luck because we'd been chasing B Braun, whose office in Sheffield, and the guys we were talking to were sympathetic, but they couldn't persuade Germany to do it. And then we got a phone call from the chap that we've been talking to, and he said, "Are you still looking for coloured syringes?" And we're like, "Yeah, we are, but we can't get anyone to do it." And he said, "Well, look, if you have it made for you, I'm in Germany now. I can get you in touch with the right people there and come to the meetings and explain to them what you want." And so we had to buy 10 million syringes. It filled a whole warehouse. It was amazing. But that's how we started. And so it doesn't have the B Braun name. It's on there because it's their CE mark, but it's small. And they were making them for us. And they said any problems that happen as a result, they're your problems. So that was the one we'll never share. They only do a 30 gauge needle. They can't put any other needle sizes on their syringe. So that was a particular product. And it's not like originally. Then our brief was to find the perfect product and make it for the same price. So that's what we did. What we hadn't reckoned on, of course, that the market's the same there. They've got companies like ASP who are selling things on. There was no margin in there for them for the never share. So that was a real problem with trying to get it beyond a certain level. But obviously then we wanted to make a 2ml syringe. And you just can't make that. We couldn't get that made OEM like for us for the same price as a standard 2ml syringe anywhere. So we went to China. We had to go to China for that, and that was our first Chinese-made product. So we went over, visited the factory 2 or 3 times, checked out the workers' accommodation. Really had it started off buying the 2ml syringe, which is a much easier product to start with than something with a needle on it, because obviously it's a much more straightforward piece of kit. So that was really successful. Straight away they realised how many insulin syringes we were selling and trying to get us to buy theirs. But we're like you. We know how difficult that can be. So over the years, I mean, there's like nearly 50 million syringes we've bought from them. So we've got a really good relationship, and it's they're always on time. Everything works as well as it should. So I was going over there, and I'd seen their needles being made several times. It did look, because I've been to the Braun factory, I've been to factories so I've seen it. I know what it should look like, and it did look good. So I went back with just some of their needles, which were brand, just for other OEM companies, and gave them to my staff and said, "Do you mind having a go with these and let me know?" And they all loved them, and I was amazed because it really was sort of very ordinary packaging. So then we started getting them to make our own brand needle, and that's what these are. So we started off with the 25 gauge and the 30 gauge needles. just to see, and it went so much better than we thought it would. Like really, just no complaints. Everybody was happy with it. So we just kept building the range, thinking, well, this is working. So then I looked at their insulin syringe in a different light, because obviously the needle is exactly the same whether it's made as a separate, or it's the same factory with the same industrial processes. So we've got 25 million of these separate needles have now gone on since we started buying them. So yeah, that's why I come here pretty confident that it's going to be okay, because that is a lot of needles. And if there was a problem, then UK drug users would have definitely let us know about it. So we started off with the 29 gauge, because a lot of, like, 30 gauge is still really a minority thing in the UK. So we did have a lot of trouble persuading people to go to a finer needle for the benefit of colour. I mean, we were able to do it, but there was a lot of places that wanted to stick with the 29 gauge, which is the most popular. So that was the first. But then, because the Braun is quite an expensive insulin syringe, we started doing the Unisharp in a 30 gauge as well, so that the people who wanted to do it but couldn't afford the Nevershare had a 30 gauge. And then 27 is the least used in the UK. Then we started doing the 27 gauge. So we're now at sort of 14-15 million Unisharps of all the different sizes distributed in the UK. So, and it's all exactly the same as the stuff that's coming here. So yeah, let me just talk you through quickly what we did to make it like ours. So one of the things I sort of half thought when I was working in needle exchange, it's not really right giving out needles for diabetics. It's, just something doesn't feel quite as valued as it should. And the packaging of medical equipment is very sort of industrial commodity that just get it out. It's all loads of languages. And so one of the things that we really tried to do was to say to drug users, hey, look, this is a product for you. We want it to work as well as possible. We want it to look as good as possible. So we cleaned up all the packaging, made it as look as good as we could. With the blister, I always thought it's a bit, there's just too much on there. So we cleaned it up, and especially when we're doing different needle gauges and different lengths, and we wanted drug users to understand what these things mean, so that they're making informed choices about which needles they're using. So we've really tried to clear up so that you can tell straight away what the product that you're using is. Switch the markings on the syringe to insulin units, and then took all of that print away from where you want to be looking at the syringe, so you can see whether you're in a vein. So this is the UK Unisharp fix. This is the one that I brought over last year. But going around, what have we got? Yeah. So that's the syringe. So going around, but then it seems like the American Terumo was the thing that most of your clients liked. That was what they wanted. So our syringe is a little bit different. So I went away and just had a tool made that is going to mean that most of the syringe is going to feel as familiar as possible to people. So the changes that we've made are put a larger plunger disc on the end of the plunger, so that you got something to get your thumb under. The next thing, we've taken the collar away from the between, so that you can get your thumb in there. I mean, we didn't really think about that too much in the UK when people have kind of got used to it, but I think it was pretty straightforward to take it away. And then what else? Oh yeah, the finger grips. Ours are slightly smaller than yours, and I just think if you're used to them being a little bit bigger, then they might as well be. So we've made them a little bit bigger. I haven't put it on here, but we've also underneath there we've put our initials, so you can see that it is it's an exchange supply syringe. And the other thing we've done is these come out of huge injection moulding machines with 16 cavities. So if there ever are problems, it's never with all of them. It would just be with a cavity. So we've put the cavity number on there, sort of big and legible, so that if you get a problem, we can we can at least go to it quite quickly, and then they can look at the cavity. And if, I mean, the thing is, we're really not expecting problems, and they're very unlikely. But you can't say there won't be any, and if there are any, you want to be able to get on them and deal with them quickly. But yes, you couldn't have a problem with. It'd be very unlikely to get a problem with all of them, but things can happen in engineering. So. And then the other thing is the tip of the syringe. So it was a slightly different angle of attack. We had slightly more plastic beyond the end of the barrel of the syringe before you got to the needle. It looked more like a rocket, and the American Terumo is just a little bit shorter. So the hope is that when people get it out of the packet, like consciously or subconsciously, it's just going to feel like something that's familiar and that they're used to. Oh yeah, but yeah, we haven't changed the needle. Like it's the same. So, and then going around the exchanges, the other thing was that so many of you are in pretty tight spaces, and the move to the bigger boxes, the bigger cartons of syringes, has been problematic. So we've gone with a mixed box of just 500, so that you can pop that on the shelf, and we're having them mixed at the factory so that you can just. So each of these boxes has 100 syringes that are all the same colour. It should hopefully be fairly easy just to pull them out and give people what they want. Yeah. So the other thing, I thought you'd be interested in how they're made. So it's like when I went around the factory, it's like, wow, I've never seen anything like this. So. And they don't normally let you take photographs. I'll show you the hygiene regulations. You're not allowed to take your phone out of your pocket while you're in the building, because there could be dust contamination which could contaminate the product. So they've never let me take photographs before. But because I do a lot of cycling, I bought a waterproof camera. So at the meeting before, I was like, I've got this waterproof camera. If I wash it with my hands and put it in the disinfectant tray, can I take it into the factory? And they were like, yeah, okay, as long as you don't photograph anybody else's products, it's only your stuff, then there's no reason. So I got a load of footage. So we cut it together and got this little film. Oh yeah, but before I just show you the factory. So this is where the needles are made. It's only like 3 years ago when they were building it as a brand new purpose-built factory. It's enormous, and I've been in it since it's finished. It really does look, it's a modern manufacturing facility. The syringes are made in Shanghai, and this is the factory. So I'll just talk you through so you get a sense of how regulated the manufacture is and how careful everybody is to make sure that there's no mistake. So when you go in, your outside shoes, there's no outside shoes allowed beyond that bench, so you take them off and they give you a pair of plastic sandals. You then have to take your watches off, earrings off, anything that could fall off or bring dust contamination into the building. They go into those little lockers that are behind there. The next step, so you can see the plastic stuff is all wafting out. That's because in the factory they've got big air filters on the roof which are filtering the air to take out all of the dust, and they're blowing into the factory. And then there's airlocks all the way through with doors, so that there's only ever a draft out, there's never a draft in that could carry any dust with it. Same setup again, you take your plastic sandals off and you put your clean room shoes on, and then you go into another airlocked room. So there's a big alarm that goes off if that steel door is open at the same time as the one on the other side. You all have to go in. Then you wash your hands, full sort of surgical hand washing procedure. And you can see in the next room through the light, that's where you start to get gowned up to go into the factory. So that's me with my hat and mask and everything on, everybody. Like this. So when they stop for breaks, the whole factory come out through there and go through the same procedures. Then you go across this sticky mat which takes any dust that you might have on your feet off your feet and into another airlock, and then this is the disinfectant bath, so they time you for 30 seconds with your hands in the disinfectant bath, and the camera was in there beside me, just soaking to make sure it's not bringing in any contamination. And then through another airlock, and then you're in the factory. So this is the sort of clean area. So these are the injection moulding machines that are making the plungers and the syringe barrels. Unfortunately, I was there seeing your product being made, so all of the plungers had already been made. I didn't get to see that, and in fact these syringes are UK Unisharp, so when you see them in a second, because obviously when they're putting the needles in, which is the bit I wanted to film, that this has already been done. So that's when those are syringes a few seconds old. And then they come out and they run across this light sheet, and they're all just checked as they come through to make sure all the flashing's off, make sure everything is exactly as it should be. Right, so this is the film. So I had this little camera. I just took little bits of film all the way, and then we cut them all together to make a video. So I'll stop it every now and then and tell you what's happening, because it's all happening pretty fast. So this is a machine that sorts them all into individuals so they can be printed on. Yeah. So this is one of the slower processes, because obviously the ink has to dry and you don't want it to smudge, so yeah, it speeds up a lot in a bit. So they're doing this for a few days before they have everything ready to start putting needles in. Yeah, so there's an ink bath, and as they come through they're just being rolled across a roller which has got the print impression, and that puts all of the print on. They go through a little oven, and then they drop down onto the conveyor belt. This is all just giving the ink time to dry, and then there's little fans blowing air on them just to make sure there's no smudging before they get, and then they go into the blue bins ready to be taken over for the needle. So normally this bit's automated, but it turns out when the people who I speak to said yeah you can make the body of the syringe exactly as you want it, they forgot to ask production, who need the collar on the syringe to pick it up and put it onto these caddies to be taken through to have the needles on. So they're adjusting the machine so that it can still pick them up. But for your production, this one, there's 6 people have to sit and stick them on. They have to do all of this by hand. Yeah. So now we're getting ready to put the needles on. And this is where it speeds up a bit. So yeah, this is going to be a little process. Yeah. So when the syringe bodies come out of the injection moulding machine, they're perfectly smooth. And if you just put the needle and the glue into the tiny little hole that the needle goes in, and it's perfectly smooth, there's nothing for the glue to get a hold of. And if you were to push really hard with the fluid in the syringe, you might force it off the end as a solid sort of plug of glue and needle. So this is high voltage electricity, which they fire down into the tip of the needle, and as it earths through the hole where the needle goes, it creates a little pop marks of erosion, spark eroding they call it. So that's what they're doing there. They're just roughening slightly the inside of the hole where the needle goes so that the glue can properly bind to it. But it's pretty impressive little firework display as it goes through, yeah. Yeah. And then they're just cooling off, ready for the next stage, which is the needles being picked up and put onto them. So this is the needle machine. It's a little bit difficult to see, but basically these are blocks of needles that have all been dropped in, ready to be put into the syringe. So there's one little chamber full of needles for every syringe slot on the caddy that comes through, and then there's a little lever that comes up. It's like the lotto ball selector, that as it pushes up through them, it will only pick up one needle, and then I think they're picked up by a little magnet and just lifted carefully across and dropped vertically down into the perfectly into the syringe. So that's what happens here, but I didn't really capture it, but you can just see that's it coming up, picking up the needle and then dropping it down into the syringe. So fast. I mean, I realise it does look like stuff could go wrong there, but it doesn't. And these machines are all insulin syringes are made in this kind of way, and the way the needles go in, there's no force on the end of on the point. They're just dropping down vertically into the slot, so there's nothing for them to blunt on, and so they do just go in and so this is then we're getting ready to be glued in. So they're in, and so this is a reservoir of glue here. So it runs along and drops a tiny drop of glue, waits a moment for that just to sink down to the bottom, then it goes back in and then drops another tiny little drop of glue. then they're glued in. Yeah. And then that's an oven in the background, but she's just gently warming it so that the glue is all set. And then this woman is expertly checking it. You can just see she's, yeah. So she's got a handful of perfect syringes and she just pulls out any. So it is possible that the occasional syringe, as it goes, as the needle as it goes in, it might go in askew or not right. So she's just looking for those. She spins them all around, just checks everything's vertical and right, and then fires it through. But this is the automated test that follows the human one. So this is a camera here and a light. It takes a digital photo of every single needle, and it compares that digital photo with an electronic image of a perfect needle. And if there's any that aren't right, then the machine knows which one that is, and you'll see that. So they're going to get silicon on next, and then after that, any ones which are blunt, askew, or in any way not right get rejected. So, yeah, so that's computers in the background is the thing that's registering. It's a little pressurised cylinder where the needles get dipped in silicon. So that's and then the next bit is where they're kicked off if they were faulty. Yeah, so that's there. You can see there's a few being thrown away there. And then they come into the next machine to have their caps put on. Final visual check just to make sure everything's gone all right, and then they go off. So before I move on, unfortunately I didn't then go on to see the plungers being put in, but basically that's quite similar to the printing. They all get selected up, they get run along a machine and the plungers are dropped in. But this is where you can be confident. Like, it might happen that people will say, oh, the green ones are really good and the blue ones are shit. That's a sort of the thing people might think, and it's so unlikely because the needle production line is running constantly. All of these syringes are going off to the next phase, which is to have the plungers put in. That is a totally separate process. The idea that you might have a problem which just affected one colour but didn't overlap, well, it hasn't happened in the 15 million. It wouldn't happen. And so I think people sometimes imagine that they're all being made on different production lines, and it's possible that one production line could be different to the others, and that's why that's how you would explain it. But it isn't like that. This is how they're made. Yeah. So they then go off. They have the plungers put in. They're then sorted and dropped into the blister packing, ready to be fully wrapped. So we then had to go out to go and see that next bit, because obviously once they start to go into the packaging, then there's more dust around, and they're already sealed and protected, so doesn't have to happen with the same level of protection. So there you go, that's the last bit of the high-speed factory. So then we all go out, so we came in. Right, so this is the blister machine. They're all horizontal, and then the top's just coming around once all the needles have been dropped in. And then they come out, so there's only a draft blowing out of the room here, and they're just being checked one last time. So that's our product in the foreground, somebody else is in the background being made. Yeah. And this is how they get them. The boxes are a bit smaller than some other boxes because she's folding them and making sure that they're as small as possible. Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, so we've got some, haven't we? We've got some products. Should we hand them out? I thought. Yeah, so I thought it'd be a good idea to let you have a look at the actual syringes, chat amongst yourselves 5 minutes, because obviously I've been talking at you, and then in 5 minutes you can come back and we can sort of talk about what the actual implementation is going to be like. If that sounds like a good plan. So I'll give you 5 minutes to shake off and chat, and then we'll pick up again. So there's two bits to this. There's how many people have we got here from who do pharmacy, or from the pharmacy, or is it just you're the representative? Okay. So a couple of things to say about pharmacies, and then we'll talk about the primary and secondary. So just the logistics of packing the packs means that when ASP are putting together the cartons for the pharmacies, they're going to be making up packs which will have all one colour syringe in them, and then but they'll mix in the box that you get. There'll be all five, or there'll be several colours. So they're just going to work their way through. So, I mean, you know, it might be better if people could go into a pharmacy and say, "Oh, I want blue syringes." But the thing is, we'd have to have 5 product lines. The pharmacies would have to keep stock of all the product lines. ASP would have a whole heap of extra manufacturing costs because they're coming in boxes of, so it's just not possible. And it's exactly the same in the UK, and we've been doing it for 10 years, and it just doesn't cause any problems. You're basically, a pharmacy provision is, and I think this would be the same for the vending machines, probably, depending on.
And the secondary programs as well. So it's going to go across everywhere.
Well, yeah. So where it is syringe distribution, and that's what you're doing, you're getting as many syringes out as you can, then it's going to be better than it is now, because there will be difference built into some of the syringes. It won't be as good as you've got from the primary, because you will be able to just give people whatever they ask for. But it doesn't cause any problems. You know, that is the service, and I think it will be fine. It's just I wanted to make sure that you weren't expecting anything different. Yeah.
I think one thing that's going to be important is explaining to clients that if they're going into small secondary programs, or if they're going into pharmacies, those places are going to have stock that they're going to have to work through on hand now.
Yeah.
Now, in some of those really small ones, that's going to be months for them to actually work through that product. So we need to talk to the clients about making sure that they understand that it's going to be a flow-through process. We're not recalling all that old stock. It's just too complicated. So it's going to have to work its way through the system. So it might take 3 to 6 months. It's no good them going off at a pharmacy because they've still got the old syringe with them. They're just going to have to kind of be a bit patient and let it work through the system. Yeah. So people need to understand that it's not going to just be an overnight kind of thing. It's going to take time for all this to flow through.
Yeah. The vending machine packs.
Yeah.
They're going to be stocked with the new ones from same time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the vending machine ones, ASP packs them. So they've run their stock right the way down. So they'll be packing the new stock from next week. So that'll be quite quick.
With the vending machines, are they going to put different colours in the packs, or are they just going to have them? Are they going to be packing?
Well, it's just going to randomly.
Yeah, randomly just do it as it is.
Yeah. I mean, at the moment, nobody ever remarks that all the syringes are identical. So if 2 people do get 2 packs that are the same colour, that's what happens now. But at least once they probably remark on it at least. So it does increase a bit. It's not as good as it, but just the added complexity and cost of trying to get to that, and the possibility of hassle then if all of one colour have gone, and people, I think, it will settle down.
How was the rollout of this in the UK? What was that like? As far as the colours went, and people wanting this colour or that colour?
Yeah, that has never been an issue. I'm not saying there's not been issues. But that has never been an issue. Yeah, people just like it. I mean, drug users, the response is usually it's great that someone's made a product for us. This is an issue that people definitely can identify with, and so they accept the limitations of us doing the best that we can. Yeah.
Do you do packs in the same way that we would do in a primary program? Do you make packs?
Yeah, not so much. Packs, it tends to be the split in the UK is pharmacies do packs and services do pick and mix. Yeah, that's pretty much all. And some pharmacies in the UK do pick and mix as well, but obviously it's not as easy as a pack. Yeah.
Thank you.
So how many colours do people need? So this is one of the nice things, that you can start to have conversations about who people are picking out for. It kind of makes a more socially acceptable way of asking for a lot of syringes. If people say, "Oh, can I have 100 blue ones from my mate," sort of thing, and so people are asking. So if they're picking out for themselves, then it's usually just one colour. But if they have got a partner, then they'll be taking 2. Houses where there's lots of people, you can decide what you need. But some people have a house rule that all of the white syringes are theirs. Everybody else can, whatever whatever they want. And so that just opens up a whole heap of quite interesting conversations that you can have with people. And I think it's a sea change for a lot of couples, because, like as you saw in the video from Avra, a lot of people just given up trying to separate their equipment, whereas and now they can do it, and that is great. Even if that change sort of cements over time as relationships change, because obviously if you've been sharing equipment for years, then stopping now it might not, but relationships change. So that's where it makes the biggest difference. And I think with Hep C treatment, where you're talking about this afternoon, if people are living together and injecting together, I'm guessing that part of your thinking about Hep C treatment was, if we don't both do it, there's no point in just me doing it, because we know that our equipment is getting mixed up. So this could give people the opportunity for just somebody to get treated and then to protect themselves better from.
Have you found that with introducing the coloured needles as well, that people then chose to, because we were just talking about how this may instigate people kind of then deciding to break up all their equipment, so okay, well, we're not sharing needles now, so we won't share our spoon, we won't share our other equipment, because we were just thinking this may actually instigate some change in the way they share other equipment as well.
Yeah,
have you seen that?
Yeah, I think that's right. That it's you're like, when you give up on something because it's just not possible, then there's a whole load of other stuff that you might as well not bother doing as well. But then once something becomes possible, then there's a whole load of other stuff that is worth doing. Yeah, so and that is part of that sort of safe space thing, I think. Yeah. So that's how many colours. What else do I have? Oh yeah. So these are the possible objections. I mean, I get the feeling that it's going to be a bit easier here than it is in the UK.
Okay.
But so I've covered why one colour can't really be better than the rest. Attractive to children, that is a thing. I mean, look, I'm not going to deny it. They obviously are. But for, well, in drug litter, it means that they're like everybody. They're more visible to everybody. And what you want with drug litter is for an adult to see it and to do something about it as quickly as possible. Yeah. And with grubby white syringes that turn grey and get lost in the grass, they do disappear. But gold ones don't. So I think, okay, yeah, it's true that they may be more visible, they might be more attractive to children, but they're also going to be seen by adults and hopefully get dealt with more quickly. Also, drug users who are trying to avoid detection and so on, like if you throw something in the dirt that you think is just going to disappear and people aren't going to see, then there's a lower level of concern about it. If you're throwing something that's bright purple and you know that everyone's going to see. So and I think in houses, like, well, if you're doing community work and going into people's houses, syringes can become a bit like furniture and they do get left lying around, and in a way having them bright colours is a good thing, because it's harder to sort of just think, oh, it doesn't matter if that they won't be seen. So certainly haven't seen any kind of actual problems as a result of that. And that's the answer that we formulated over time to try and I don't think this was an objection way back when we first started, but I think it was. Yeah, I think you lot are better educated than UK drug workers. You've got like training programs and stuff. So I think there are some people who believe their own propaganda, that when they say to people, oh, you should only use a syringe once, that everybody only uses a syringe once. But that, like, you can just look at the number of injections and the number of syringes. We know that there's a lot of syringe reuse happening, and this isn't encouraging it. It's just trying to reduce the risks. Yep, covered that. So here we go. This is so what you're going to get now. I mean, if there are any quality issues, which there may be, it does happen, especially when people don't people don't feel in control. The service is changing again. They maybe got used to, I don't know, you might get complaints. So you need to tell Robert and Ben, the QNSP, are the first port of call. But I'm staying here until nearly Christmas. And that is to be around to go and really just get on top of any issues, because we will report them, and if there were any, and we definitely, we know that this manufacturing process does work and can work, and if there are problems, we will get on it and make sure that they're solved. But I mean, usually just having somebody interested and concerned going and really trying to find out what's happened, our experience is that the problems generally aren't quality of the syringes. There's other injecting techniques stuff happening. There's people feeling pissed off about all sorts of other stuff. So yeah, I brought my trusty 200 microscope. So if we did get, say to people, just send us back the box, just take a photograph of every needle at 200 times magnification, you can see that they're all sharp. They either are or they aren't, and so that's we'll get on it. I'm here till Christmas, happy to come and talk to any service user groups or staff groups, or yeah.
With the 29 gauge syringe that we also keep, will they be replaced with the new colour buttons?
That's my hope. I've got to persuade Terumo, but I think they'll be a lot happier in a few weeks when this is all when everything's settled down. But yeah, I mean, it's much smaller than the 27 gauge. That's by far. I think even nationally, it's not just. The 27 is the main syringe, but yeah, I didn't say that actually. One of the things we did in the UK was we did one range of colours and then did another one, and by the time we got to the third one, we realised we'd sort of got it. We hadn't left ourselves much room for colour variation, so that's one of the reasons we started again at the beginning with your 27 with a different colour set than the 27s for the UK, is so that we can do all of the ranges in three different lots of 5 colours, so they'll be different in that. Yeah.
So they're not going to be replaced at the same time?
No, they're not going to be replaced at the same time. No. Yeah, good.
But maybe in the future.
But in future, that's.
We never say never, but
yeah.
I think they've got to get used to having these 5 colours and embed that, and we've got some other services that we hope to take on board.
Sorry.
When we did the trial, I mean, the clients were raving about just the sharpness. Absolutely,
Yeah. Right.
Real,
Yeah. I mean, that was, you learn as you go along. Partly it's partly the branding, because Unisharp says your customers can see that we're interested in the same thing that they're interested in. That preservation of veins is a really important thing for reducing drug-related harm. That is what we were interested in, and people just take it with a more positive attitude and feel good about it.
I think the big selling point we don't have as well, apart from the colours, is the fact, like you said before, is just that this is a product for them.
Yeah.
This is not an insulin needle, this is a product for them. And
Yeah.
I think that, apart from everything else, being able to talk to our clients from that perspective.
That's right. It's that mix of it's a product for you, but we haven't changed anything fundamental that could make it go wrong.
Yeah.
Like the needle is still a sharp. It's a sharp. Yeah.
This is the first syringe that's actually been licensed by the TGA for intravenous use.
Yeah, that's huge.
So everything else has been intramuscular or intradermal. So.
Yeah.
Yes. So I've got some cards. So I'll leave my business, my number. So I'll stick those at the back during lunch, and give me a ring, drop me an email if there's anything we can do to help. We've done the little booklets sort of for clinicians, but I think that if you've got any ideas about what you think we should be saying to your clients, if there's anything you think that would be useful, then just let me know, and we can definitely sort of knock stuff up and make it available. But obviously you're the main first port of call. So yeah, that's our contact details. So yeah. Okay, well, I'll let you have lunch then, shall I? I think it looks like it's all arrived at the back. Thank you very much.